Have you ever poured your heart and soul into something, only to have it thrown back in your face? That's exactly what happened to me. I built my uncle's entire company website from scratch, for free, pulling all-nighters and skipping social. Events for months. My reward? Being fired without warning and erased from the company like I never existed. But karma has a funny way of working out, especially when you're the only one who understands the complex code keeping the website alive. This is the story of how my uncle's greed became his downfall, and how I learned that sometimes, the best, revenge is simply stepping aside and watching things fall apart. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Growing up in Portland, Maine, I always looked up to my Uncle Frank Reynolds. He was everything my dad wasn't: confident, successful, and charismatic. While my father worked steady hours at the local paper mill, Uncle Frank was building his marketing empire, Reynolds Dynamic Solutions. I'd hear stories about his business deals at every family gathering, how he was expanding into new markets, hiring more people, and making connections with bigger clients. When I graduated with my computer science degree from the University of Maine last year, I was drowning in student debt and desperate for experience. The job market was brutal. Entry-level positions requiring 3 years of experience, unpaid internships wanting master's degrees. After 27 rejection emails, I was starting to panic. That's when Uncle Frank called. "Tyler, my boy. How's life treating you after graduation?" His booming voice filled my cramped apartment through the phone speaker. "Not great, Uncle Frank. Can't seem to land a job. Everyone wants experience I don't have yet." There was a pause on the line. "You know, we're actually looking to overhaul our company website. The current one is trash. Looks like it was built in 2005. What if you came on board as our web developer? Could be a good experience for your resume." My heart skipped a beat. That would be amazing. What's the pay like? Well, here's the thing. Uncle Frank's voice took on that smooth sales pitch tone I'd heard him use on clients before. "We can't offer much salary-wise right now. Budget's tight with the expansion into the Chicago market. But I'll tell you what, you build us a killer website, and once revenue picks up, we'll bring you on full-time with benefits. Plus, you'll get to put Reynolds Dynamic Solutions on your resume. That's worth its weight in gold." I should have seen the red flags. Should have realized that "we can't offer much" actually meant we can't offer anything. But I was desperate, and this was family. So I agreed. "Great. Come by the office tomorrow and we'll get you set up." Reynolds Dynamic Solutions operated out of a renovated warehouse in downtown Portland. The exposed brick walls and industrial lighting screamed, "We're creative, but also serious business people." Uncle Frank's office had a view of the harbor, with a massive mahogany desk that probably cost more than my entire education. "Tyler, there he is." Uncle Frank emerged from behind his desk, arms spread wide. He was dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that made my department store outfit look like pajamas. "Welcome to RDS." He introduced me to the team. Melissa Hartman, the operations manager with a permanent expression of mild disappointment. Jake Thornton, the sales director who looked like he'd walked straight out of a men's fitness magazine. And Brianna Williams, the marketing coordinator who barely looked up from her phone during the introduction. "And this is where you'll be working." Uncle Frank gestured to a small desk crammed in the corner of the open office. The computer looked ancient, with a monitor thick enough to stop a bullet. "What about the website project?" I asked. Right. The current site is an embarrassment. Potential clients take one look and go elsewhere. We need something modern, sleek, with all the bells and whistles. E-commerce capabilities, portfolio galleries, integrated customer relationship management, the works. As he spoke, I realized this wasn't just a simple website redesign. He was describing a complex, multifaceted web application that would normally cost tens of thousands of dollars and require a team of developers. "Just one person working on this?" I asked. trying to keep my voice steady. Uncle Frank clapped my shoulder. "You're a smart kid. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Besides, this is your chance to prove yourself. Show everyone what you can do, the B." First week was overwhelming. I spent hours taking inventory of their needs, sketching wireframes, and researching platforms. I pitched WordPress as a solution. Easy to maintain, plenty of plugins for the features they wanted. WordPress? Uncle Frank scoffed. That's what bloggers use. We need something custom, something that says we're innovative. So custom it would be. I began coding from scratch, working 12-hour days. When everyone else left at 5 p.m., I'd still be there, surrounded by empty coffee cups and takeout containers. Uncle Frank would stop by my desk on his way out. "How's it coming along, champ? Making progress?" "It's a big project," I'd explain, showing him the front-end design or database architecture, especially for one person. "That's why I gave it to you. I knew you could handle it. The Reynolds blood runs through your veins too, you know." 3 months in, I had a working prototype. The site was responsive, elegant, with a custom CMS that even Melissa could use. I'd built a portfolio showcase that automatically pulled in client testimonials, a blog with advanced SEO features, and an integrated quote request system. It wasn't perfect, but it was light years ahead of their current site. I presented it at the weekly staff meeting, nervously clicking through the features as everyone watched. "The admin interface lets you update content without any coding knowledge," I explained, showing how easy it was to add new portfolio items. "And here's the analytics dashboard I built. It tracks user behavior, conversion rates, everything you need to see how the site is performing." When I finished, there was silence. Then Jake spoke up. "Can it integrate with our CRM system?" "Not yet, but that's next on my list." Brianna raised an eyebrow. "What about social media? There should be an Instagram feed on the homepage." "I can. Add that too." Uncle Frank leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "It's a good start, Tyler, but we need more. Our competitors' sites have video backgrounds, animation effects, all that flashy stuff clients love. We need to wow people." I wanted to point out that flashy stuff doesn't equal good user experience, but instead, I nodded. "I'll keep working on it." And I did. For another 2 months, I refined, added features, optimized performance. The code base grew complex, with custom solutions for RDS's specific needs. I documented everything meticulously, not just the user-facing features, but the underlying architecture. I knew someday I'd have to hand this off to someone else for maintenance. What I didn't realize was how soon that day would come. It was a Thursday evening in early October. The office was quiet, most people having left hours ago. I was fixing a bug in the contact form when Uncle Frank appeared at my desk, accompanied by a man I'd never seen before. "Tyler, I want you to meet Scott Daniels. He's joining us as our new Director of Digital Strategy." Scott gave me a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was older, maybe mid-40s, with salt and pepper hair and expensive glasses. "Scott has extensive experience with web development and digital marketing," Uncle Frank continued. "He's worked with some major national brands." "Great," I said, extending my hand. "I could definitely use help finishing the website." Scott's handshake was brief. "Actually, I've been reviewing what you've done so far. It's interesting, but I think we need to take a different approach." My stomach dropped. "Different how?" "More enterprise level. The current architecture won't scale with our growth projections. I'm thinking we should move to a cloud-based solution with microservices." I opened my mouth to defend my work. The site was absolutely scalable, and microservices would be massive overkill for their needs. But Uncle Frank cut me off. "Scott knows his stuff, Tyler. He's been in the industry for 20 years. Scott smiled again, that same empty expression. "Don't worry, I'll make sure to incorporate some of your ideas." They walked away, heads bent in conversation. I sat there, stunned, as the implications sank in. My project was being taken away. Worse, it was being handed to someone who was already planning to dismantle it. The next morning, I arrived early, determined to talk to Uncle Frank. His door was closed, but I could hear voices inside, him and Scott. I waited, rehearsing what I would say. When the door finally opened, Uncle Frank looked surprised to see me. "Tyler, just the man we wanted to talk to. Come in." Scott was sitting in one of the visitor chairs, a laptop open in front of him. He didn't look up as I entered. "Tyler," Uncle Frank began, his sales voice on full blast. "Scott and I have been discussing the website situation, and we've made some decisions. The project has grown beyond what we initially envisioned. It's not fair to keep you working on it without proper compensation. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off." For a brief, hopeful moment, I thought he was finally going to offer me a real position. "So we've decided to release you from the project. Scott will take over from here with his team." The room seemed to tilt. Release me? What does that mean? "It means thank you for your contribution, but we'll take it from here." Scott's voice was clinical, like he was discussing a business transaction rather than months of my life. "But I built the entire system," I protested. "Nobody knows it better than I do. The documentation isn't even complete yet." "Scott has experience reverse engineering complex systems," Uncle Frank said, as if that solved everything. "And let's be honest, this is beyond your experience level. We need a professional solution." The words stung more than I wanted to admit. "So that's it? After 5 months of unpaid work, you're just cutting me loose?" Uncle Frank had the decency to look uncomfortable. "You got valuable experience for your resume, like we discussed, and I'll be happy to serve as a reference. What about the full-time position you promised, when revenue picks up, remember? Well, that was contingent on the site being completed and meeting our needs. Since we're going in a different direction now," he trailed off, spreading his hands in a "what can you do" gesture. I looked between them, reality crashing down on me. I'd been playing, used for free labor and then discarded. When something shinier came along. "I'll need you to hand over all access credentials and documentation," Scott said, sliding a piece of paper across the desk. "And sign this, confirming you relinquish all rights to the code you've written while working here." The document was a work-for-hire agreement backdated to my first day. It stated that all intellectual property I created belonged exclusively to Reynolds Dynamic Solutions. "I never signed anything like this before," I said. "It was implied in our arrangement," Uncle Frank replied smoothly. "This just formalizes it. Standard practice." Nothing about this was standard practice, but what choice did I have? I wasn't in a position to fight a legal battle against my uncle's company. With a bitter taste in my mouth, I signed the paper. Great. Uncle Frank's enthusiasm returned once the document was safely in his hands. "We appreciate all your hard work, Tyler." "Really, we do. If you could just get Scott up to speed on the codebase before you go, that would be fantastic." And just like that, I was reduced from developer to offboarding resource. I spent the next 3 hours showing Scott the system architecture, explaining the custom functions, pointing out the unfinished areas. He barely engaged, typing notes occasionally and asking surface-level questions that revealed he understood far less than he'd claimed. By lunchtime, he'd had enough. "I think I've got the gist. My team can figure out the rest." I packed up my few personal items in silence. No one in the office seemed to notice or care that I was leaving. Uncle Frank was nowhere to be seen, conveniently in meetings all afternoon. As I was about to walk out, Melissa approached, her expression softening slightly. For what it's worth, I thought the website was really good. Scott's just Frank's golf buddy. He probably showed him some fancy presentation and convinced Frank he needed enterprise solutions. She handed me a card. If you're looking for work, my brother runs a tech startup. They might be interested in someone with your skills. It was the only kindness anyone had shown me all day. I thanked her and left, the weight of wasted months heavy on my shoulders. That night, I sat in my apartment scrolling through job listings again. My phone rang. My dad. "How's the job with your uncle going?" he asked. I hesitated, then told him everything. About the unpaid work, the promises, and finally, being replaced. There was a long silence when I finished. Then my dad sighed. "I wish I could say I'm surprised. Frank has always been Frank. Even when we were kids, he'd take credit for other people's work. It's how he got ahead. Why didn't you warn me? Would you have believed me? You always thought." The sun rose and set on Uncle Frank. There was no accusation in his voice, just sadness. Sometimes lessons have to be learned firsthand. He was right. I wouldn't have listened. I'd been so dazzled by Uncle Frank's success that I'd ignored the warning signs. "What do I do now?" I asked. "Start over. Apply for jobs, real jobs, with real companies that value their employees. And maybe consider this a valuable lesson about not giving away your skills for free, especially to family. Sometimes the people closest to you can take advantage of the worst." The next morning, I woke up to an email from Scott. Subject line: Urgent. Website issues. Having trouble understanding some of your code implementations. Site is experiencing errors when attempting to update. Call me ASAP. I stared at the message, a strange mix of vindication and bitterness washing over me. Part of me wanted to help, to prove I was the bigger person. But a larger part remembered Uncle Frank's dismissive words. "We need a professional solution." I closed the email without responding and opened my laptop to work on my resume instead. The website I'd built was now their problem, and something told me they were about to discover just how valuable my unpaid contribution had really been. 3 days passed without me responding to Scott's email. 3 days of applying to jobs, updating my portfolio, and trying to forget about Reynolds Dynamic Solutions. My phone buzzed constantly with texts and calls from Uncle Frank, but I ignored them all. Let him and his professional solution figure it out. On the 4th day, my curiosity got the better of me. I opened my laptop and navigated to the RDS website. The homepage loaded, barely. The sleek design I'd created was still there, but the dynamic elements were frozen. The testimonial carousel stuck on a single review, the portfolio gallery showing only placeholder images. The contact form had a glaring error message across it. I couldn't help but smile. Scott was clearly in over, his head trying to modify code he didn't understand. My documentation was thorough, but intentionally technical. I'd written it for another developer, not for someone who'd oversold their abilities. My phone rang again. Uncle Frank. This time I answered. "Tyler. Thank God. We've got a situation. Here." His voice had lost its usual confidence, replaced by barely contained panic. "I heard. Website problems? It's a disaster. Nothing works right. Scott says the code is, what did he call it, Melissa? Unnecessarily complex and poorly structured." I bit back a retort about Scott's qualifications. "That's unfortunate. Look, I know things ended awkwardly between us, but we need your help. Just come in for a day or two, fix whatever's wrong, and we'll compensate you properly this time." "Properly? What does that mean exactly?" Uncle Frank hesitated. $500 for a day's work. That's more than fair. I nearly laughed. $500 for fixing a website that would cost them $50,000 to rebuild from scratch. "I'm busy with job interviews," I said instead. $1,000 then. "Please, Tyler. We've got 3 potential clients coming in next week for presentations. If the website's not working, we're screwed." The desperation in his voice was satisfying. I won't lie. But I wasn't interested in a temporary Band-Aid solution that would let Uncle Frank off the hook. I signed away my rights to the code, remember? It's Scott's problem now. Scott quit this morning. Said the project was beyond salvage, and he wasn't set up for success. I could practically hear Uncle Frank's teeth grinding. Just name your price, Tyler. $20,000, I said without hesitation. Paid up front, and a formal apology in writing for how you treated me. The line went silent for so long I thought he'd hung up. Finally, he spoke, his voice cold. That's extortion. No. That's the market rate for emergency web development from someone who actually knows what they're doing. Take it or leave it. This is how you treat your family? After everything I've done for you? The audacity was breathtaking. Everything you've done? You mean like exploiting my skills for 5 months without pay? Or making promises you never intended to keep? Or replacing me without warning and trying to pass my work off as someone else's? You're making a big mistake, Uncle Frank warned. You'll never work in this town if I have anything to say about it. Goodbye, Uncle Frank. Good luck with the website. I hung up and blocked his number. My hands were shaking, partly from adrenaline, partly from disbelief at my own boldness. I'd never spoken to him like that before. It felt terrifying and liberating. The next day, I had an interview with Crestline Tech, a mid-sized software company downtown. The interviewer, Sarah Jenkins, was refreshingly straightforward. Your portfolio is impressive, but there's a gap in your employment history. What have you been doing since graduation? I considered how to answer. I could lie, make up some freelance work, or tell the sanitized version where I gained valuable experience. Instead, I told the truth. I made a mistake. I built a complex web application for my uncle's company without a contract, believing his promise of future employment. After 5 months, he replaced me with someone else, and I walked away with nothing but the experience. Sarah's eyebrows rose. That's unusually honest. I learned my lesson the hard way. I won't make the same mistake twice. Any company I work for will get my best effort, but I also expect to be valued and compensated fairly. She nodded slowly. Fair enough. What would you do differently now? Get everything in writing. Set clear boundaries about scope and compensation, and trust my technical judgment when someone without expertise tries to override it. The interview continued, covering my technical skills and experience. To my surprise, Sarah seemed more impressed by my honesty about the RDS situation than put off by it. We've all had learning experiences, she said as we wrapped up. Sometimes the painful ones teach us the most. 2 days later, I received a job offer from Crestline Tech. The salary was modest but fair for an entry-level position, with benefits and clear advancement opportunities. I accepted immediately. My first day at Crestline coincided with an interesting development. While setting up my new email, I received a message from Melissa Hartman, my uncle's operations manager. Tyler, things are falling apart here. The website is completely down now. Just shows error messages. Frank is blaming the hosting company, but they say it's the code. He hired another developer who took one look and quit after an hour. Said something about spaghetti code and impossible dependencies. Frank's losing it. Thought you should know. I sent a brief reply thanking her for the update, but offering no help. Part of me felt guilty, not for Uncle Frank, but for Melissa and the other employees who were suffering the consequences of his decisions. But this wasn't my problem to solve anymore. Later that week, my dad called to tell me Uncle Frank had reached out to him. He wanted me to convince you to help fix the website, Dad explained. Said he'd make it worth your while. What did you tell him? That he made his bed and now he has to lie in it. And that if he ever tries to exploit my son again, family connection or not, he'll answer me. I smiled. Thanks, Dad. He also mentioned something strange. Said you deliberately sabotaged the website before you left? Is that true? No, I said honestly. I didn't need to. I built that system to be maintainable, but only if you understand how it works. I documented everything thoroughly, but Scott probably thought he knew better and started making changes without understanding the dependencies. One wrong change in the wrong place, and the whole thing starts to unravel. Dad mused. Sounds like Frank got exactly what he paid for. My first month at Crestline passed quickly. The work was challenging but rewarding, and for the first time since graduation, I felt like I was on the right path. My team leader, Marcus Chen, became a mentor, showing me best practices and helping me grow as a developer. You've got good instincts, he told me after I solved a particularly tricky bug. Just need more experience and confidence. I didn't think about Reynolds Dynamic Solutions much anymore. Until one evening when I was having drinks with some colleagues and spotted a familiar face at the bar, Jake Thornton, Uncle Frank's sales director. He recognized me too, making his way over with a whiskey in hand. Tyler, man, am I glad to see you. Jake, surprised to see you here. The sales team at RDS usually frequented more upscale establishments. Yeah, well. He gestured vaguely with his drink. Things change. How's RDS doing? Jake laughed bitterly. It's not. Frank laid off half the staff last week, me included. What? Why? The website disaster was just the beginning. Without a functioning online presence, those big clients he was courting all backed out. Then word started spreading that we were technologically incompetent. Who wants to hire a marketing firm that can't even maintain their own website? I winced. Despite everything, I hadn't wanted the company to fail, just Uncle Frank to face consequences for his actions. Frank's been telling everyone you sabotaged the site, Jake continued, but nobody's buying it. Melissa showed the executive team your documentation and the emails from Scott admitting he started making changes without understanding the system. Frank looked like a fool. And now he's laying people off instead of taking responsibility? Classic Frank move. Jake drained his whiskey. Always someone else's fault. Anyway, I'm actually kind of relieved. Been interviewing with some bigger agencies in Boston. Should have left years ago, but Frank's got a way of making you feel like you'd be nothing without him. I knew that feeling all too well. What about you? Jake asked. Landed on your feet, I see. Yeah, working at Crestline now. Good company, fair pay, actual growth opportunities. Jake nodded. Good for you. You know, I always thought Frank was an idiot for letting you go. That website was the best thing RDS had going for it. We chatted a bit longer before Jake left to meet some friends. His revelation stayed with me, though. Uncle Frank was struggling, but instead of admitting his mistake and trying to fix it, he was doubling down, blaming me, laying off staff, probably still telling clients that bigger and better things were just around the corner. The next day, at work, I mentioned the encounter to Marcus during our lunch break. Sounds like your uncle is experiencing the tech version of karma, he remarked. I guess so. I still feel bad for the other employees, though. Marcus considered this. You know, there's a way you could help them without helping your uncle. What do you mean? Well, if his company's failing and he's laying people off, those employees will be looking for jobs, right? And you know they're not bad at what they do. They just had bad leadership. I caught his drift. You think we should recruit them? We've got 3 open positions on the marketing team. Could be a win-win. They get jobs, we get pre-vetted talent who already know how to work together. It was a brilliant idea. With Marcus's help, I reached out to Melissa, Brianna, and 2 other RDS employees I'd respected. Within 2 weeks, all 4 had interviewed at Crestline, and 3 received offers. Melissa was one of them. I can't thank you enough, she told me after accepting the position. Especially after how things went down at RDS. Water under the bridge, I assured her. How bad is it there now? She grimaced. Frank's down to a skeleton crew. Just him, his assistant, and 2 junior marketers. The office lease is too expensive, so they're moving to a co-working space next month. And get this, He finally realized he needs a working website, so he hired an actual agency to build one, costing him $30,000. $30,000? I repeated, remembering how he'd balked at my $20,000 emergency fix fee. Yep, and it won't be nearly as customized as what you built. Just a basic template with some branding. I shook my head, amazed at Uncle Frank's stubbornness. How's he taking it all? Not well. Drinking too much, blaming everyone but himself. Last week, he tried to tell a client that the website issues were because you installed malicious code before leaving. The client asked why he didn't pursue legal action if that was the case. Frank had no answer. Has he tried to contact you about coming to Crestline? Melissa laughed. Oh, he doesn't know yet. I'm saving that revelation for my exit interview. Tomorrow. Speaking of which, I should warn you, he's still telling anyone who'll listen that you're the villain in this story. Let him, I said with a shrug. The people who matter know the truth. That weekend, I visited my parents for Sunday dinner, something I'd been doing more regularly since starting at Crestline. The conversation inevitably turned to Uncle Frank. Your Aunt Sharon called yesterday, Mom said as she served dessert. Frank's company is in serious trouble. They might not make it through the quarter. Dad snorted. Maybe he should have thought about that before treating his own nephew like free labor. Charles, Mom admonished gently. He's still family. Family doesn't exploit family, Dad countered. I warned Frank years ago that his shortcuts would catch up with him eventually. What do you mean? I asked. Dad sighed. Your uncle's always been looking for the easy way out. In high school, he'd copy other students' work. In college, he'd take credit for group projects he barely contributed to. His whole career has been built on using other people's talents and discarding them when he squeezed them dry. And you never said anything to me about it. Would you have believed me? You thought he hung the moon. Besides, sometimes lessons have to be learned firsthand. He wasn't wrong. I'd been so dazzled by Uncle Frank's apparent success that I'd ignored all the warning signs. The fancy office that was mostly for show. The way he'd promise clients things. His team struggled to deliver. The revolving door of employees who never seemed to last more than a year or two. I don't wish him ill, I said finally. I just wish he'd take responsibility for once. People rarely change at his age, Dad replied. But you learned something valuable, didn't you? I nodded. Know my worth. Get everything in writing. And maybe most importantly, success built on using people isn't real success at all. 2 months. Later, I received a LinkedIn request from Uncle Frank. Curious, I accepted it, only to immediately receive a direct message. Tyler, I hope this finds you well. I've been reflecting on our past working relationship and realize I made some serious misjudgments. RDS is undergoing restructuring, and I'm personally taking a more hands-on approach to our digital strategy. If you're open to it, I'd like to discuss potential collaboration opportunities. No pressure, just coffee and conversation. Frank. Translation. His business was failing. He'd burned through whatever developers he'd hired since Scott, and now he was desperate enough to crawl back to me. No actual apology, of course. Just vague acknowledgement of misjudgments and an invitation to be used again under the guise of collaboration. I showed the message to Marcus during our afternoon coffee break. You're not considering it, are you? He asked incredulously. Not for a second, I assured him. Just amazed at the audacity. What? Are you going to reply? I thought about it. I could ignore him, which he deserved. I could tell him exactly what I thought of his offer, which would feel satisfying but accomplish nothing. Or I could take the high road while still making my position clear. I'm going to wish him luck with his restructuring and recommend a few reputable web development agencies. Professional, helpful, and final. Marcus nodded approvingly. The best revenge is living well, they say. And I was living well. 6 months after the RDS debacle, I'd been promoted to mid-level developer at Crestline. My work was being recognized, my skills were growing, and I was making genuine connections with colleagues who respected me. The experience with Uncle Frank, painful as it had been, had taught me invaluable lessons about self-worth, boundaries, and the importance of working with people of integrity. Late one Friday afternoon, I was heading out of the office when I ran into Melissa in the elevator. "Did you hear the news?" she asked. "What news?" "Reynolds Dynamic Solutions officially closed its doors yesterday. Frank's filing for bankruptcy." I absorbed this information, surprised by my lack of vindication. "How do you know?" Sharon called. "Me. Wanted to know if Crestline had any more openings. Frank's assistant needs a job." The elevator reached the ground floor, and we stepped out into the lobby. "Does it feel weird?" Melissa asked. "Being right, I mean. You told him the website would fall apart without proper maintenance. And it did. You told him treating people badly would come back to haunt him, and it has." "It doesn't feel as good as I thought it would," I admitted. "I never wanted the company to fail. I just wanted him to recognize my value." Melissa gave me a knowing look. "That was never going to happen. Frank doesn't recognize anyone's value but his own. That's why he's filing for bankruptcy while you're thriving." As I walked home through the crisp autumn air, I reflected on the journey of the past year. From the eager new graduate willing to work for free, to the confident professional who knew his worth. From being at Uncle Frank's mercy, to having former RDS employees as my colleagues at a better company. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "It's Frank. We need to talk." I stared at it for a long moment, then deleted the message and blocked the number. Some chapters were better left closed. Whatever Uncle Frank wanted to say now, it was too little, too late. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to exploit my skills and discard me, Uncle Frank had set in motion the very events that led to his downfall. Not because I'd sabotaged anything, but because he'd undervalued both my work and me. The company website, like any complex system, needed someone who understood it to maintain it. Without that understanding, it was only a matter of time before it crashed completely. As I turned the corner onto my street, I couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even or watching someone fail. Sometimes it's simply about walking away and building something better for yourself. 1 year after the collapse of Reynolds Dynamic Solutions, my life had transformed completely. I'd been promoted again at Crestline Tech, now leading a small team of developers on client projects. My salary had doubled since my entry-level position, and I'd finally paid off a significant chunk of my student loans. The apartment with the leaky faucet and temperamental heating was a distant memory. I'd moved into a modern one-bedroom downtown with a view of the harbor. My team at Crestline included 2 former RDS employees, Melissa, who'd become our project manager, and Brianna, who'd discovered her true talents in UX design rather than social media management. We made a formidable trio, our shared history at RDS creating a shorthand that made us exceptionally efficient. "Tyler, got a minute?" Marcus poked his head into our workspace one Tuesday morning. As Crestline's development director, he rarely visited our floor unless something important was brewing. "Sure." I followed him to the small conference room, curious. "How familiar are you with Apex Marketing Group?" he asked once we were seated. I thought for a moment. "They're one of the bigger agencies in New England, right? Boston-based, lots of corporate clients." "That's them. They've approached us about a potential partnership. They handle the marketing strategy and client relationships. We handle the technical implementation, starting with a redesign of their own corporate website." "Sounds promising." "There's just one complication." Marcus slid a folder across the table. "The CEO is a man named Frank Reynolds." My blood ran cold. "As in, your uncle, yes. Apparently, after RDS folded, he landed on his feet at Apex. Started as a consultant, worked his way up to CEO within 8 months. I shouldn't have been surprised. Uncle Frank had always been a master at failing upward. His charisma and connections, enabling him to land on his feet no matter how badly he screwed up. Does he know Crestline is being considered for this partnership? Marcus nodded. That's the strange part. According to their outreach team, he specifically requested us. Asked for you by name to lead the project. I leaned back, processing this. Information. After a year of silence, Uncle Frank was re-entering my life through a professional back door. The question was why. What do you think his angle is? I asked. Marcus shrugged. Could be legitimate. Maybe he recognizes your talent now and wants to make amends, or he's plotting something, I finished. Revenge for what he perceives as me causing his company's downfall. The partnership would be lucrative for Crestline, Marcus admitted, but I wanted to run it by you first. If you're not comfortable, we'll pass. I appreciated that more than he knew. Let me think about it. That evening, I met my dad for dinner at our favorite seafood place overlooking the harbor. After catching up on family news, I broached the subject of Uncle Frank. Did you know he's CEO at Apex Marketing now? Dad's eyebrows shot up. You're kidding. Sharon never mentioned it. Aunt Sharon and I don't exactly talk these days, I reminded him. Uncle Frank's wife had taken his side completely during the fallout, sending me a scathing email about family loyalty that I'd never responded to. Still, Dad mused, CEO of Apex. That's a significant step up from RDS. How'd he manage that? That's what I'm trying to figure out. And now he wants my company to partner with his on a website redesign, with me specifically leading the project. Dad. Set down his fork, his expression serious. What's your gut telling you? That there's more to this than a simple business partnership. But I can't figure out his endgame. Frank always plays the long game, Dad said thoughtfully. When we were kids, he once spent 6 months being nice to the neighbor who caught him stealing apples, just to get the guy to drop his guard so he could steal his bike. Great. So this is some elaborate setup for revenge. Maybe. Or maybe failing. So publicly taught him something. People can change, Tyler. I snorted. Uncle Frank? Stranger things have happened. Dad took a sip of his beer. Just be careful. Go in with your eyes open, document everything, and make sure there are ironclad contracts this time. After dinner, I walked along the waterfront, weighing my options. I could tell Marcus to decline the partnership, avoiding Uncle Frank altogether. The safest choice, but also potentially limiting Crestline's growth. Or I could accept the challenge, face Uncle Frank on my terms, with the full backing of my company behind me. By the time I reached my apartment, I'd made my decision. The following day, I told Marcus I was willing to lead the Apex project, with conditions. All communication would be in writing, all agreements formalized with proper contracts, and I would have final authority over technical decisions. Marcus readily agreed, impressed by my professionalism. 2 weeks later, we had our first meeting with the Apex team. It was scheduled for their headquarters in Boston, a gleaming glass tower downtown. I arrived with Marcus and Melissa, all of us dressed in our corporate best. The Apex conference room was exactly what I'd expected. Sleek, modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city. What I hadn't expected was the warm welcome from their team, who seemed genuinely excited about the partnership. And then Uncle Frank walked in. He looked older somehow, still impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, but there were new lines around. His eyes and his hair had more gray than I remembered. Our eyes met across the conference table, and for a brief moment, I saw something unexpected in his gaze. Uncertainty. Tyler, he said, extending his hand. Thank you for coming. It's good to see you. I shook his hand firmly. Mr. Reynolds, congratulations on your position at Apex. If the formality bothered him, he didn't show it. Thank you. I've been following Crestline's work. Impressive results with the Harrington financial redesign last quarter. The meeting proceeded with surprising normalcy. Uncle Frank was professional, focused, and, most shockingly, deferential to his team's expertise. When their lead designer suggested a direction, he actually listened instead of overriding her. When their developer raised concerns about a technical approach, Frank asked thoughtful questions instead of dismissing him. It was like watching a completely different person. After the preliminary discussions, Uncle Frank suggested he and I take a coffee break while the teams continued hashing out details. Melissa shot me a concerned look, but I nodded reassuringly. I was curious to hear what he had to say in private. We walked to a small cafe in the lobby of the building. After ordering, we sat at a corner table away from other patrons. "I owe you an apology," Uncle Frank began without preamble. "What happened at RDS, the way I treated you, was inexcusable." I stared at him, searching for signs of the old Frank, the manipulation, the sales pitch, the hidden agenda. But his expression was open, his body language lacking the usual aggressive confidence. "What changed?" I asked bluntly. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Bankruptcy has a way of clarifying things. Losing everything I'd built, watching employees I'd known for years lose their jobs because of my decisions, it forces a certain kind of reckoning. And now you're CEO of Apex. Seems like you landed on your feet just fine." "It's not what it looks like," he said. After RDS collapsed, no one would touch me. I applied to 20 agencies and got 20 rejections. Finally, Sharon's brother connected me with the founder of Apex, an old college friend of his. I started as a junior account manager at 52, taking orders from 20-somethings. It was humbling. This didn't align with the narrative I'd constructed. "But now you're CEO." "Not because of my charm or connections," he said with a self-deprecating smile. "Because I actually put in the work, learned from people younger and smarter than me, listened instead of talked. And when the opportunity for advancement came, I'd built enough goodwill that people actually supported me. Why reach out to Crestline? There are dozens of development firms in Boston." Uncle Frank looked me directly in the eye. "Because you're the best. Your team's work speaks for itself. And because I owe you more than an apology, I owe you a chance to succeed where I failed you." I wasn't ready to fully trust this new version of Uncle Frank, but I couldn't deny the sincerity in his voice. People could change. I'd changed, grown more confident, more assertive, more aware of my own worth. Was it so impossible that losing everything had triggered a similar transformation in him? "The project will be strictly professional," I said. Finally. "No family dynamics, no special treatment, positive or negative. I wouldn't want it any other way." As we walked back to the conference room, Uncle Frank paused. "There's one more thing you should know. The current Apex website, it's built on the framework you created for RDS." I stopped in my tracks. "What?" "After bankruptcy, all RDS assets were liquidated. Apex acquired some of them, including the website code. Their technical team recognized the quality of your work and built on it. That's actually how you first came to their attention. They wanted to know who had architected such an elegant system. It was a strange feeling, knowing my work had lived on even after RDS collapsed, like finding out a part of me had been thriving in a place I'd never seen." Back in the conference room, the teams had made good progress on the project outline. As we discussed the timeline and deliverables, I noticed something else different about Uncle Frank. He was letting others take credit for their ideas instead of presenting everything as his own innovation. By the end of the meeting, we had a solid plan for moving forward. The Crestline team would begin work on the technical specifications the following week, with regular check-ins scheduled with the Apex team. As everyone gathered their materials to leave, Uncle Frank approached me one last time. "There's an envelope on your chair," he said quietly. "It's not a bribe or anything unethical, just something I should have given you a long time ago. Look at it when you have a moment alone." On the train back to Portland, after Marcus and Melissa had disembarked, at their stops I finally opened the envelope. Inside was a check for $20,000. the exact amount I'd demanded for emergency repairs on the RDS website over a year ago, along with a handwritten note. Tyler, this is long overdue. It doesn't begin to cover the value of what you created or the time you invested, but it's a start. The funds come from my personal account, not Apex. No strings attached. Whether we work together going forward or not, this debt needed to be paid. Frank. I stared at the check, unsure how to feel. It wasn't about the money. My Crestline salary had long since eclipsed what I would have earned at RDS. It was the acknowledgement that mattered. The recognition of my worth that I'd been denied before. Over the next few weeks, the Apex project proceeded smoothly. Their team was talented and collaborative, making the process almost enjoyable. Uncle Frank maintained his professional distance, participating in meetings but never attempting to exert undue influence or control. It was Melissa who finally voiced what I'd been thinking. Is it just me, or is your uncle actually decent now? She asked during a working lunch at the office. Seems that way, I agreed. But I'm still waiting for the other shoe to drop. Sometimes there is no other shoe, she pointed out. Sometimes people just grow. 3 months into the project, we hit our first major obstacle. The integration with Apex's customer management system was proving more complex than anticipated, threatening our timeline and budget. I called an emergency meeting with both teams to address the issue. Uncle Frank arrived early, reviewing the technical documentation with genuine interest. I've been thinking about the integration problem, he said when we had a moment alone. What if we approached it differently? Instead of forcing a direct connection between systems, what about creating a middleware layer that handles the translation? I blinked in surprise. It was actually a sound suggestion, one that showed he'd been paying attention to the technical discussions. That could work, I admitted. We'd need to build the middleware from scratch, but it would solve the compatibility issues. Would it require an additional budget? Yes, about 30% more for this phase. The old Frank would have balked, tried to find a cheaper shortcut, or insisted we make it work within the original scope. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. Prepare a detailed proposal with the adjusted timeline and budget. If it's the right solution technically, I'll make sure it gets approved. The middleware approach was approved the next day, with Uncle Frank personally presenting the technical rationale to Apex's board. The additional budget was allocated without argument. As the project progressed, I found myself gradually lowering my guard. Not completely. I still documented everything meticulously and made sure all decisions were properly recorded, but enough to admit that perhaps Uncle Frank had genuinely changed. My dad was less convinced. Just remember who you're dealing with, he warned during our weekly phone call. Frank has always been charming when he wants something. I know, Dad, but he seems different, more authentic. I hope you're right. Just be careful. 7 months into the project, we were nearing completion. The new Apex website was a masterpiece of design and functionality, with features that showcased both companies' strengths. My team at Crestline had grown with the project, adding 2 new developers and a dedicated QA specialist. The partnership was already generating inquiries from other potential clients, impressed by the early demos we'd shown. The night before the final presentation to Apex's board, I worked late at the office, making sure every detail was perfect. To my surprise, Uncle Frank appeared at my door around 9, carrying takeout bags. Thought you might be hungry, he said, setting the food on a nearby desk. Chinese okay? We ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before he spoke again. I've been thinking about tomorrow's presentation. I'd like you to take the lead. I paused mid-bite. That's usually the CEO's role. Usually, yes. But this is your creation, Tyler. You should be the one to present it. Won't the board expect to hear from you? Uncle Frank smiled slightly. They'll hear from me too, but I want them to see who's really behind the technical excellence of this project. It was the kind of gesture the old Frank would never have made, sharing credit, much less giving it away entirely. I searched his face for signs of an ulterior motive but found none. "Thank you," I said finally. "I'd be honored." As we finished eating, Uncle Frank grew more contemplative. "You know, I've been watching how you lead your team, the way you listen to them, support their ideas, give them credit publicly. Just basic good management. It's more than that. It's leadership. Something I never really understood until recently." He gathered our empty containers, tossing them in the trash. "The irony is, I could have learned it from you years ago, if I'd been paying attention." The next morning, I presented the new website to the Apex board with Uncle Frank at my side. The demonstration went flawlessly, with board members particularly impressed by the middleware solution that enabled seamless integration with their existing systems. When the Q&A began, one board member asked about the development team. Uncle Frank stepped forward. "The technical excellence of this project is entirely due to Tyler Evans and his team at Crestline," he said, gesturing to me. "I'm sure most of you know that Tyler is my nephew, but what you may not know is that before joining Crestline, he built a similar system for my previous company, a system I failed to properly value or maintain, contributing directly to that company's downfall." A murmur ran through the room. This wasn't the narrative I'd expected him to present. "In bringing Tyler and Crestline into this partnership," Uncle Frank continued, "I was looking for technical expertise, yes, but also redemption of a sort, a chance to do business the right way, with integrity and respect for others' contributions. The success of this project proves that approach works far better than my old methods ever did." After the presentation, as the board members filed out with congratulations and handshakes, Uncle Frank pulled me aside. "I meant what I said in there," he told me quietly. "Working with you these past months has taught me more than just better business practices. It's taught me what I missed out on by treating you as an asset rather than family." "It's not too late to change that," I found myself saying. For the first time since our reunion, I saw genuine emotion break through Uncle Frank's professional demeanor, a flash of hope quickly contained. "I'd like that," he said simply. As we gathered our materials to leave, he asked, "What's next for you, Tyler? After this project?" I smiled. "Actually, I've been thinking about starting my own development firm. Small, specialized, focused on quality over quantity. Brave move in this market. I learned from watching you, both what to do and what not to do." Uncle Frank laughed, a genuine sound without the forced heartiness of his RDS days. "Fair enough. When you're ready to make that move, let me know. I might have some contacts. Who could help?" "I appreciate that, but this time, everything will be properly contracted and compensated from the start." "I wouldn't have it any other way," he replied. "Some lessons only need to be learned once." As we walked out of the Apex, building together, I realized something unexpected had happened over the course of this project. Not just a professional success or a personal vindication, but something more profound. A rebuilding of trust I'd thought forever broken. The website that had once crashed and burned had become the foundation for something new. Not just a better website, but a better relationship. One built on mutual respect rather than exploitation, on recognition of value rather than taking it for granted. Sometimes, it takes losing everything to understand what really matters. For Uncle Frank, that lesson had come through bankruptcy and humiliation. For me, it had come through standing up for my worth and walking away. And now, remarkably, our paths had converged again, not as the exploiter and the exploited, but as equals. Professional colleagues who happened to be family, each bringing their strengths to the table. As I boarded the train back to Portland, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From naive graduate to exploited nephew to respected professional, each step, even the painful ones, had shaped me into someone stronger, wiser, and more capable than before. The website had crashed, yes, But from its ruins, something far more valuable had emerged. 2 years after the successful Apex website launch, I stood in front of my own office space in downtown Portland, keys in hand, heart racing with anticipation. The polished brass plaque beside the door read, Lighthouse Digital Solutions, my company's name, a nod to Maine's coastal heritage and my personal journey from darkness to clarity. Starting my own development firm had been a leap of faith, but the reputation I'd built through the Crestline Apex partnership had given me a solid foundation. Marcus had been surprisingly supportive of my decision to leave, even connecting me with several clients as a parting gift. "You've outgrown us," he'd said during my exit interview. "Some people are meant to build things of their own." My phone buzzed with a text from Ellie Parker, my first hire and now technical director. "Conference room set up for the Anderson pitch. Coffee and pastries ordered. We're ready when you are, boss." I smiled at the word boss. Still strange to hear, even after 6 months of running my own company. Lighthouse had grown faster than I'd anticipated, now employing 7 full-time staff and 3 regular contractors. We'd carved out a niche creating custom web applications for medical practices and healthcare providers, an industry desperate for better digital solutions, but often underserved by mainstream developers. As I walked through the main workspace, I greeted my team, all focused on their monitors, headphones on, lines of code reflecting in their glasses. The environment was exactly what I'd envisioned: collaborative when needed, focused when necessary, and always respectful of each person's unique contributions. My office overlooked the harbor, a daily reminder of how far I'd come from that cramped corner desk at Reynolds Dynamic Solutions. The view wasn't as spectacular as Uncle Frank's had been, but it was mine, earned through my own effort and paid for with my own money. Uncle Frank. Our relationship had evolved in unexpected ways since the Apex project. The initial professional detente had gradually shifted into something resembling actual family ties. Monthly dinners with him and Aunt Sharon had become part of my routine. Awkward at first, but increasingly comfortable as old wounds healed. He'd been one of my first calls when I decided to start Lighthouse. "Smart move," he'd said without hesitation. "The healthcare sector is underserved, and you've got the technical chops to excel there." "Any advice?" I'd asked, still finding it strange to be seeking his counsel after everything that had happened. "Just one thing. Remember that your reputation is your most valuable asset. Guard it fiercely." Coming from the man who had once threatened that I'd never work in Portland again, the irony wasn't lost on me. But the advice was sound, and I'd taken it to heart, being selective about which clients we took on and never promising what we couldn't deliver. The Anderson Medical Group pitch went smoothly. Dr. Anderson, a stern woman in her 50s who ran the largest independent practice in southern Maine, seemed impressed by our portfolio and approach. "Your proposal mentioned experience with HIPAA compliance," she noted, scrutinizing me over rimless glasses. "Can you elaborate?" I gestured to Ellie, who launched into a detailed explanation of our security protocols and previous work with patient portals. I'd learned from Uncle Frank's mistakes: never take credit for your team's expertise and never overstate your capabilities. After the meeting, as we walked the Anderson team out, I spotted a familiar figure waiting in our reception area. Uncle Frank himself, looking slightly out of place in his Boston Power suit among our casual Portland office decor. "Uncle Frank," I greeted him with genuine surprise. "I didn't know you were coming up today." "Last-minute decision," he said, rising to shake my hand. "Got something I wanted to discuss in person. Do you have time for lunch?" 40 minutes later, we were seated at a waterfront restaurant, the early summer breeze carrying the scent of salt and fried seafood through the open windows. "Impressive operation you've built," Uncle Frank remarked, studying the menu. 7 employees in 6 months is significant growth. 9 if you count the contractors, I corrected. "We're selective about who we bring on, but the right talent is worth investing in." He nodded approvingly. "That's actually related to why I'm here. Apex is expanding its healthcare division. We've landed 3 major hospital networks as clients, but our in-house technical team is struggling with the specialized requirements. I saw where this was heading. You're looking for a development partner. Specifically, I'm looking for Lighthouse. He set down his menu, meeting my gaze directly. This would be a major contract, Tyler. 7 figures over 2 years with potential for renewal. The amount took my breath away. A contract that size would secure Lighthouse's future, allow us to hire more staff, maybe even open a second office in Boston. Why us? I asked, the old wariness not entirely gone. There are larger firms with more healthcare experience. 3 reasons, Uncle Frank replied, counting on his fingers. 1, I've seen your work firsthand and know its quality. 2, healthcare clients value trust above all else, and our existing relationship gives them confidence. And 3, he paused, a hint of the old Frank charm surfacing. I'd rather keep success in the family. I couldn't help but smile at that. Things have certainly changed. More than you know. He leaned forward, lowering his voice slightly. I'm retiring next year. The board doesn't know yet. Just Sharon and now you. I'm helping position Apex for the transition, building partnerships that will outlast my tenure. This revelation surprised me. Uncle Frank retiring voluntarily? The man, who once seemed defined by his business ambitions. Why now? Apex is thriving under your leadership. He looked out at the water for a moment before answering. The heart attack changed my perspective. Heart attack? When did this happen? I straightened my alarm. 3 months ago. Minor one? Caught early. Sharon made me promise not to tell anyone until I was fully recovered. He waved off my concern. I'm fine now, following doctor's orders, taking medications, but it was a wake-up call. There are other things I want to do besides chase clients and manage boardroom politics. The news hit me harder than expected. Despite our complicated history, the thought of Uncle Frank facing his mortality stirred something protective in me. What will you do after retiring? A smile softened his features. Sharon and I bought a place in the Berkshires. I'm going to write that business book I've been threatening to write for years. Spend time with our grandkids. Maybe teach a course or 2 at the community college. The image was so at odds with the Uncle Frank I'd grown up knowing, the relentless businessman always chasing the next deal, that I had trouble reconciling it. Does Dad know about the heart attack? Uncle Frank shook his head. Your father and I, we're still working on things, one step at a time. The decades-long tension between my father and his brother was legendary in our family. Sometimes I wondered if their relationship had influenced how I'd initially approached working with Uncle Frank, expecting the worst, waiting for betrayal. You should tell him, I said gently. He'd want to know. I will. Soon. He cleared his throat, clearly ready to change the subject. So, about this partnership, I've brought the preliminary documentation. He pulled a folder from his briefcase. Take your time reviewing it. Have your lawyers look it over. This isn't RDS. There's no rush, no pressure. I accepted the folder, appreciating the transparency. I'll need to discuss it with my team. This would mean expansion, probably hiring at least 3 more developers with healthcare expertise. Of course. Just let me know by the end of next week if you're interested in principal. We can work out the details after that. As we finished, lunch, Uncle Frank asked about my parents, my siblings, my life outside work. Normal family conversation that would have been unimaginable 3 years ago when I was just free labor to him. I found myself genuinely enjoying his company, the sharp business mind now tempered with something like wisdom. Back at the office, I gathered my leadership team. Ellie, our tech director, Mason Reed, our project manager, and Vanessa Torres, our lead designer, to discuss the Apex opportunity. This would be a game changer for us, Mason said after reviewing the documentation. But can we handle it with our current resources? We'd need to hire, Ellie pointed out. at least 2 more back-end developers with healthcare integration experience, and probably another front-end specialist. Vanessa was more cautious. Is there any concern about working with your uncle again, given the history? A valid question. I appreciated that my team felt comfortable raising it. Things are different now, I assured them. Uncle Frank has changed. Apex is a legitimate enterprise with proper processes, and most importantly, we'd have everything in writing with fair compensation. What about our existing clients? Mason asked. I don't want us to get so focused on Apex that we neglect the people who got us started. Absolutely right, I agreed. If we move forward, we'll need a dedicated team for the Apex contract, separate from our current client work. No one gets abandoned or shortchanged. After 2 hours of discussion, weighing pros and cons, examining potential pitfalls, and brainstorming solutions, we reached a consensus. Lighthouse would pursue the partnership with Apex, but with clearly defined boundaries and expectations. That evening, as I locked up the office, I found myself thinking about the strange circularity of my journey. From building a website for free for my uncle's company to potentially partnering with him on a 7-figure contract. From being undervalued and discarded to being sought out specifically for my expertise. The universe had a peculiar sense of humor sometimes. Over the next week, Lighthouse's lawyer meticulously reviewed the contract documentation while we developed a detailed capacity plan for the potential partnership. By Friday, we were ready to move forward. I called Uncle Frank to give him the news. Excellent, he said, sounding genuinely pleased. I'll have our legal team coordinate with yours to finalize the details. And Tyler, this is going to be good for both our companies. The formal partnership announcement came a month later, after all paperwork was signed and initial planning meetings completed. Apex issued a press release highlighting Lighthouse's expertise in healthcare web applications, while we added a statement to our website welcoming the collaboration. The response from the Portland business community was immediate. Local news covered the partnership, featuring profiles of both companies. Several potential clients reached out, impressed by our association with a company of Apex's stature. Even my father seemed impressed, finally admitting that perhaps his brother had changed after all. Just be careful, he warned reflexively. Old habits dying hard. Document everything. Already done, Dad, I assured him. We've learned our lessons. 6 weeks into the partnership, I flew to Boston for a progress meeting with the Apex team and their hospital clients. The scope of the project was becoming clear. A comprehensive patient management system that would integrate with existing electronic health records while providing a user-friendly interface for both medical staff and patients. During a break-in, the presentation, I found myself alone with Dr. Rebecca Lawrence, the Chief Medical Information Officer for New England Regional Healthcare, Apex's largest client. Frank speaks very highly of you, she remarked, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. Says you're the best in the business for this kind of specialized development. That's generous of him, I replied, still not entirely comfortable with such praise. From Uncle Frank. He also mentioned you're his nephew. She gave me an appraising look. Normally, I'm wary of family business connections, but in this case, it seems to work. We haven't always seen eye to eye, I admitted. But we've found a way to separate family dynamics from professional relationships. Dr. Lawrence nodded. In healthcare, that's a valuable skill. We deal with life and death decisions, often involving colleagues we've known for decades. Being able to maintain professional boundaries is essential. Her words resonated with me. The ability to compartmentalize, to work effectively with people regardless of personal history? Wasn't that exactly what Uncle Frank and I had learned to do? The meeting concluded successfully, with all stakeholders approving the initial development plan. As we gathered our materials, Uncle Frank approached me with an unexpected request. Would you be willing to stop by the house before heading back to Portland? Sharon would love to see you, and there's something I want to show you. Curious, I Agreed. I'd visited their Boston home a few times for family gatherings in recent months, but never for what sounded like a personal invitation. Uncle Frank's house was in Brookline, a stately colonial with manicured gardens and a 3-car garage. Aunt Sharon greeted me warmly at the door, ushering me into their sunlit kitchen where she'd prepared tea and her famous lemon squares. "Frank's in his study," she said, handing me a plate. "He's been mysteriously busy there for weeks. Go on up. I'll join you shortly." I found Uncle Frank in a book-lined room on the second floor, standing before a large corkboard covered with photos, newspaper clippings, and handwritten notes. "My memoir project," he explained, gesturing to the board. "Not just a business book anymore, more of a family history and personal reckoning." I moved closer, examining the materials. Photos of Uncle Frank and my father as children. Newspaper clippings about RDS and later Apex. Family gathering snapshots spanning decades. And there, in the center, a printed email with a familiar subject line. "Urgent, website issues." "You kept it," I said, surprised. It was the wake-up call I needed but didn't recognize at the time. Uncle Frank moved to stand beside me. "I've been interviewing family members, old colleagues, employees, trying to understand the patterns in my life. How I ended up becoming someone who would exploit his own nephew. The vulnerability in his voice was something I'd never heard before. What have you discovered?" I asked quietly. That success doesn't excuse behavior. That talent deserves respect and fair compensation, regardless of age or relationship. That burning bridges eventually leaves you stranded on an island of your own making. He pointed to another document pinned to the board, the work-for-hire agreement I'd reluctantly signed, at RDS. "I'm not proud of the man who drafted this," Aunt Sharon joined us, slipping her arm through her husband's. "Frank's been on quite a journey these past few years. The heart attack just accelerated what was already happening." "The book won't portray me as a hero," Uncle Frank continued. "It's more about accountability and growth. About recognizing that the business tactics I thought made me successful were actually holding me back from building something truly lasting." I studied the board again, noticing a section labeled Redemption that included photos from the Apex Lighthouse. Partnership announcement. "Where do I fit into this narrative?" I asked. Uncle Frank smiled. "You're the catalyst. The person whose talent I failed to value, whose resilience showed me a better path forward." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I don't expect the book to erase what happened, but I hope it might help other business leaders avoid making the same mistakes." As I drove back to Portland that evening, I reflected on how completely my perception of Uncle Frank had transformed, from childhood hero to exploitative boss to cautious business partner to, what? A flawed human being trying to make amends? A former adversary becoming something like a mentor? The complexity of our relationship defied simple categorization now, which was perhaps as it should be. Family relationships rarely fit into neat boxes, especially when intertwined with professional connections. 2 months into the Apex partnership, Lighthouse had grown to 15 employees, with a dedicated team handling the hospital projects. The work was challenging but rewarding, pushing our technical capabilities while providing the stability of long-term contracts. One Wednesday afternoon, as I was reviewing code for the patient portal, my assistant buzzed me. "There's Charles. Evan's here to see you, says he's your father." I was surprised. Dad rarely came to my office, preferring to meet at his house or a restaurant. "Send him in." Dad looked uncomfortable in the sleek office environment, his flannel shirt and work boots at odds with our modern decor. He declined coffee, refused to sit, and got straight to the point. "Frank called me this morning. Told me about the heart attack." I nodded, waiting for more. "Why didn't you tell me?" A hint of accusation colored his tone. "It wasn't my news to share, Dad. He asked me not to." He paced to the window, looking out at the harbor. "All these years I've been warning you about him, telling you to be careful, and now you're in business with him again. keeping his secrets. It's not like that, I said gently. He's changed. The partnership is solid, professionally managed with proper contracts. People don't change, Tyler. Not fundamentally. Not at his age. I disagreed, but arguing the point wouldn't help. What did you say when he told you about the heart attack? Dad's shoulders slumped slightly. I said I'd come down to Boston this weekend. That Sharon shouldn't have to carry the burden alone. He turned to face me. He wants us both there. A family dinner, he called it. The implications were clear. After decades of tension, my father and his brother were tentatively reaching toward reconciliation, with me somehow positioned as the bridge between them. Will you come? Dad asked, uncharacteristic uncertainty in his voice. Of course, I replied without hesitation. Some things are more important than old grievances. Dad nodded, relief evident in his expression. Your mother thinks I'm being stubborn, says life's too short for decades-long feuds. Mom's usually right about these things. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Don't tell her I admitted that. He gestured around my office. This place, it's impressive. You've built something good here. Coming from my father, who measured his words carefully and rarely offered praise, this was significant recognition. Thanks, Dad. That means a lot. As he left, I thought about the strange sequence of events that had led to this moment. A website, built for free. A betrayal. A company's collapse. And now, years later, a family slowly healing its fractures, with business relationships somehow facilitating personal reconnections. The website that crashed had set in motion consequences none of us could have predicted, rippling outward to affect careers, companies, and family bonds in ways both destructive and ultimately constructive. Later that week, reviewing the progress on the hospital portal with my team, I realized something profound. The technical skills that had once been exploited were now being properly valued, not just financially but in terms of respect and recognition. The code that had once been dismissed as unnecessarily complex was now being celebrated for its elegance and efficiency. Success, I was learning, wasn't just about financial reward or professional achievement. It was about creating systems, both technical and interpersonal, that could withstand challenges, adapt to changing circumstances, and ultimately thrive. Just like a well-designed website. 5 years after founding Lighthouse Digital Solutions, I stood at the podium in the Portland Convention Center, accepting the Maine Technology Business of the Year award. The audience, a mix of tech industry leaders, local business owners, and politicians, applauded as I adjusted the microphone. Thank you for this honor, I began, looking out at the sea of faces. When I started Lighthouse with just a laptop and a dream of building better healthcare technology, I never imagined we'd grow to a team of 42 amazing professionals serving clients across New England. My gaze found my parents in the front row, pride evident on their faces. Beside them sat Uncle Frank and Aunt Sharon, who had driven up from their home in the Berkshires for the ceremony. Uncle Frank caught my eye and gave me a subtle nod of approval. Success has many authors, I continued, and I'd like to acknowledge some of the people who made this possible. My incredible team at Lighthouse, who bring their talents and passion to work every day. Our clients, who trust us with their digital futures. My parents, who taught me the value of integrity and perseverance. I paused, taking a breath before the next acknowledgement. And my uncle, Frank Reynolds, who taught me some of the most valuable business lessons of my career, though perhaps not in the way either of us expected. A ripple of knowing laughter moved through the audience. Uncle Frank's book, The Cost of Cutting Corners, A Business Leader's Reckoning, had become something of a sensation in entrepreneurial circles after its publication last year. His candid account of how exploiting talent and devaluing contributions had nearly destroyed his first company had resonated with readers, particularly his detailed chapter about the infamous website incident. The journey from building a website for free to running $1 million tech company hasn't been straightforward, I said. But every challenge along the way has shaped Lighthouse's core values: fair compensation for expertise, transparent client relationships, and technology that genuinely improves people's lives. As I concluded my speech and returned to my table, the weight of the Crystal Award in my hands felt like a tangible validation of the path I'd chosen. The Lighthouse Apex partnership had blossomed into a nationally recognized success story, with our patient management system now implemented in 17 hospital networks across the country. After the ceremony, we gathered for a celebratory dinner at Harborview, Portland's premier seafood restaurant. The private dining room overlooked the water, strings of lights reflecting on the dark waves below. "To Tyler," my father proposed, raising his glass, "for building something honest and lasting." "To Tyler," the others echoed, clinking glasses. Conversation flowed easily throughout the meal, a far cry from the tense family gatherings of years past. Uncle Frank, now fully retired from Apex and notably more relaxed in casual attire, shared anecdotes from his book tour. Aunt Sharon showed photos of their grandchildren on her phone. My parents discussed their upcoming anniversary trip to Alaska. During dessert, Uncle Frank leaned toward me. "Got a minute to step outside? There's something I want to discuss." We walked to the restaurant's deck, the October air crisp with the promise of winter. "I've been approached about adapting the book into a documentary series," Uncle Frank said without preamble. "The producers are particularly interested in the website story, our fallout and eventual reconciliation. They want to interview both of us." I hadn't expected this. A documentary? About business ethics? More about redemption and second chances. The producer called it a cautionary tale with a hopeful ending. He studied my reaction. "I told them I wouldn't consider it without your approval. This is your story, too." 5 years ago, I would have immediately refused, protective of my privacy, and wary of Uncle Frank's motives. Now I found myself considering the possibility. What would be the focus? I asked. How exploitative business practices ultimately backfire. How proper valuation of talent leads to sustainable success. And on a personal level, how family relationships can be rebuilt after betrayal. He leaned against the railing. They're also interested in the healthcare angle. How Lighthouse is changing patient experiences through better technology. The potential for positive impact was intriguing. Many young developers faced exploitation similar to what I'd experienced, often lacking the confidence or resources to stand up for themselves. I'd need editorial approval, I said finally, and assurance that client confidentiality wouldn't be compromised. Uncle Frank nodded. Already stipulated in the preliminary discussions. I wouldn't have mentioned it otherwise. As we returned to the dining room, I marveled at how our relationship had evolved, from exploitation to partnership to this new phase where we were potentially becoming co-narrators of our shared history. The following Monday, back at Lighthouse, headquarters, now occupying 3 floors of a renovated mill building overlooking the Presumpscot River, I met with my executive team to discuss our expansion plans. The success of our hospital management system has generated interest from medical practices nationwide, creating opportunities beyond our regional focus. We've got inquiries from healthcare systems in Chicago, Atlanta, and San Diego, reported Ellie, now our Chief Technology Officer. They want customized versions of the platform. Can we handle that level of expansion? I asked. I don't want to sacrifice quality for growth. Mason, our operations director, pulled up a detailed capacity analysis on the conference room screen. We'd need to hire at least 12 more developers and establish satellite offices in those regions. Significant investment up front, but the projected 5-year revenue justifies it. Do you really think the documentary will make a difference? I asked. To some people, yes. The business world is full of young Franks and vulnerable Tylers. If our story makes even a few Franks reconsider their approach, or gives a few Tylers the courage to stand up for their worth, that's meaningful change. The documentary, titled Code of Ethics: The True Cost of Free Work, premiered 6 months later at the Boston Business Film Festival. Watching our story unfold on screen, professionally, edited and contextually framed, was a surreal experience. The producers had done an exceptional job of balancing the personal narrative with the broader business ethics implications. At the Q&A session afterward, someone asked what I considered the most important lesson from my experience. Understanding your true value, I answered without hesitation. Not just in terms of fair compensation, but in terms of respect for your expertise and contribution. When I built that website for free, I wasn't just giving away my labor, I was tacitly agreeing to be undervalued. Learning to accurately assess and assert my worth was the foundation for everything that followed. The documentary went on to win several awards and was eventually picked up by a major streaming service, bringing our story to a much wider audience than we'd anticipated. The response was overwhelming. Messages from young professionals thanking me for giving voice to their experiences, inquiries from business schools wanting case studies, even a few apologetic emails from business leaders recognizing their own exploitative patterns. 1 year after the documentary's release, I received an unexpected call from Dr. Rebecca Lawrence of New England Regional Healthcare. "Tyler, I have an unusual proposition for you," she began. "Our board has been following Lighthouse's success with great interest. The patient management system you developed with Apex has transformed our operations and significantly improved patient satisfaction scores." "I'm glad to hear that," I replied, wondering where this was heading. "We've been discussing the future of healthcare technology, particularly the integration of AI and predictive analytics into patient care. We believe Lighthouse is positioned to lead in this space, but you'd need substantially more resources to develop at the necessary scale." She paused, and I waited for her to continue. "The board would like to discuss acquiring Lighthouse Digital Solutions, with you remaining as CEO and leading our expanded technology division." The offer caught me completely off guard. Acquisition had never been part of my vision for Lighthouse. We were profitable, growing steadily, and maintaining our commitment to quality and workplace culture. "I appreciate the interest," I said carefully, "but the Lighthouse isn't for sale. We value our independence." "I understand," Dr. Lawrence replied, "but I'd ask you to consider the potential impact. With North's resources behind you, the technologies you're developing could reach millions of patients instead of thousands. We're not looking to absorb and dismantle the Lighthouse. We want to amplify what you've built." She outlined a preliminary offer that was, admittedly, extremely generous. More importantly, it included guarantees of operational autonomy and retention of the entire Lighthouse team. "Think about it," she concluded. "This could be the next chapter in the Lighthouse story." That evening, I found myself driving to the Berkshires, needing perspective from the one person who understands both business acquisition and my personal journey. Uncle Frank welcomed me into his home office, listening intently as I explained the situation. "What's holding you back?" he asked when I'd finished. "The offer seems solid, the guarantees substantial. I built Lighthouse from nothing after being undervalued and discarded," I explained. "The idea of selling it feels like giving up control," he finished for me. "Like risking everything you've built." "Exactly." Uncle Frank leaned back in his chair, considering. "You know, there's an interesting parallel here. Years ago, you trusted me with your talent, and I betrayed that trust. Now, you're being asked to trust Energy with your company." The comparison hadn't occurred to me, but he was right. My hesitation stemmed partly from that earlier experience. "The difference," Uncle Frank continued, "is that you're not that vulnerable new graduate anymore. You've built something valuable, enough that they need to offer real guarantees. You have leverage I never gave you. He stood, moving to the window that overlooked the rolling Berkshire Hills. The question isn't whether you can trust them completely. No business relationship ever has that guarantee. The question is whether this partnership advances your ultimate goal. What did you start Lighthouse to accomplish? I thought about my mission when founding the company, to create healthcare technology that genuinely improved patients' lives, while building a workplace where talent was properly valued and rewarded. To make healthcare more accessible and effective through better technology, I said finally, and to prove that ethical business practices can coexist with success. Uncle Frank turned back to me. And would Noah's resources help you achieve that on a larger scale? Yes, I admitted. Their distribution network alone would multiply our impact tenfold. Then perhaps this isn't an ending, but an evolution. The website crashes led to Russia's collapse, which led to our reconciliation, which led to the Apex partnership, which led to Lighthouse's success, which has now led to this opportunity. He smiled slightly. Sometimes the path forward isn't what we expected. Driving back to Portland that night, I reflected on how far we'd all come from that initial website project. The code I'd written for free, that had crashed so spectacularly after my departure, had set in motion a chain of events none of us could have anticipated. And now, as I considered Noah's offer, I recognized that every step of that journey, even the painful parts, had prepared me for this decision. I knew my worth now. I understood the value of what I'd built. And I had the confidence to ensure that any deal would protect both Lighthouse's mission and its people. The website had crashed, yes. But from that crash emerged something far more valuable than code: wisdom, resilience, and the understanding that true success comes not from exploitation, but from recognizing and honoring the value of what we create together. The acquisition negotiations with New England Regional Healthcare stretched over 3 intense months. I assembled a team of advisors, legal experts, financial analysts, and business strategists to ensure Lighthouse's interests were protected. Throughout the process, I kept our entire staff informed, holding weekly town halls to address questions and concerns. Transparency had become a cornerstone of Lighthouse's culture, and I wouldn't abandon it now, even during sensitive negotiations. One rainy Tuesday in April, I sat in our conference room with Nora's executive team, reviewing the latest draft of the agreement. Their CEO, William Donovan, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, slid a revised document across the table. "We've addressed your concerns about operational autonomy," he explained. "As you'll see in Section 12, Lighthouse will function as an independent division within Noah's corporate structure. You'll retain full authority over hiring, technology development, and implementation strategies." Dr. Lawrence, who had championed the acquisition from the beginning, added, "The board was particularly impressed by your insistence on protecting your team. It confirmed our assessment that Lighthouse's culture is central to its success." I reviewed the new provisions carefully. The terms were indeed favorable, far more than I would have imagined possible when I started Lighthouse. Beyond the substantial financial package, the agreement guaranteed everything I'd fought for: protection for my team, continued control over our technology development, and resources to scale our healthcare solutions nationwide. "I believe we have a deal," I said finally, extending my hand to Donovan. As we shook on it, I couldn't help but think about the contrast between this negotiation and my experience at RDS. Back then, I'd had no advocate, no legal representation, no leverage. I'd signed away my rights to the website code I'd created because I saw no alternative. Now, I was negotiating as an equal with one of the largest healthcare networks in New England, with the power to set terms and walk away if they weren't met. The formal announcement came the following week. New England Regional Healthcare had acquired Lighthouse Digital Solutions for $47 million. with provisions for additional performance-based payments over the next 5 years. I would continue as CEO of Lighthouse while also joining Noah's executive leadership team as Chief Digital Innovation Officer. The news made headlines in both the business and technology sectors, with industry analysts praising the deal as a perfect, strategic alignment. Local press celebrated it as a main success story, a homegrown company achieving national impact while remaining rooted in the community. My phone buzzed constantly with congratulatory messages, but the one that meant the most came from Uncle Frank. "You've achieved something remarkable on your own terms. Couldn't be prouder of you." The integration of Lighthouse into Nora's ecosystem began immediately. We moved into larger offices in Portland, doubling our staff within 6 months to handle expanded projects. Our patient management system was rolled out to all 17 NERH hospitals and their affiliated clinics, with plans for national licensing the following year. Meanwhile, the documentary about our story continued gaining traction. After its streaming success, several universities adopted it as teaching material for business ethics courses. I began receiving invitations to speak at conferences and business schools, sharing lessons learned from both the RDS debacle and Lighthouse's subsequent success. During one such speaking engagement at Harvard Business School, I was approached by a young woman who lingered after my presentation. "Mr. Evans, I'm Jessica Rivera, a second-year MBA student." She seemed nervous, but determined. "Your documentary really resonated with me. I've been in a similar situation, working unpaid for my stepfather's tech company with promises of future employment that never materialized." Her story sounded painfully familiar. "What happened?" "I finally walked away after 8 months, started freelancing instead." She hesitated. "But now he's threatening to sue me if I use any of the code I wrote for him in my portfolio. Says it belongs to his company under work-for-hire rules, even though I never signed anything." I'd heard variations of this story dozens of times since the documentary's release. Talented young people exploited by family businesses, then legally intimidated when they tried to assert their rights. "Do you have a few minutes to grab coffee?" I asked. "I might be able to help." Over the next hour, I listened to Jessica's full story, struck by the parallels to my own experience. Her stepfather's company, Vertex Solutions, had exploited her programming skills while she was still in graduate school, promising equity and a leadership position that never materialized. After 8 months of building their e-commerce platform, she'd been sidelined in favor of a more experienced developer her stepfather had met on the golf course. "The worst part is, I still need to include that work in my portfolio to show my capabilities," she explained. "But he's threatening legal action if I do." "Without a signed agreement, his claim is shaky at best," I told her. "But legal battles are expensive and draining, even when you're in the right." An idea had been forming in my mind for months, sparked by the many similar stories I'd heard. Perhaps it was time to transform these individual hardships into systemic change. "Jessica, what if there was a foundation that provided legal support to young professionals in exactly your situation? Would that have helped you stand up to your stepfather earlier?" Her eyes widened. "Absolutely. Just knowing I had backup would have made a huge difference." That conversation became the catalyst for the Fair Start Foundation, a nonprofit organization I established 6 months later with an initial endowment of $3 million from my acquisition proceeds. Its mission: to provide legal support, career counseling, and educational resources to young professionals facing exploitation or unfair treatment in the workplace, with a special focus on family business dynamics. Uncle Frank surprised me by volunteering to serve on the foundation's advisory board, bringing his unique perspective as a reformed exploiter. "Nobody knows these tactics better than someone who used to employ them," he pointed out when I questioned his motives. "I can help identify the warning signs and provide insight into how these situations develop." The foundation launched with a media campaign featuring short videos of young professionals sharing their experiences, alongside resources for identifying and addressing workplace exploitation. Within its first year, Fair Start provided legal assistance to over 200 cases nationwide, with a success rate of nearly 80% in securing fair compensation or favorable settlements. Jessica Rivera became our first success story. With Fair Start's legal support, she reached a settlement with her stepfather that acknowledged her ownership of the code she'd written and allowed her to use it in her portfolio. She later joined Lighthouse as a project manager, bringing her experience and insight to our healthcare technology team. One evening, as I worked late in my office at Lighthouse NERH reviewing quarterly reports, I received an unexpected call from Uncle Frank. "Are you busy tomorrow afternoon?" he asked without preamble. "There's someone I'd like you to meet." "I have meetings until 2, but I'm free after that." "What's this about?" "Better to explain in person. Can you come to the Regency Hotel downtown around 3? We'll be in the lobby bar." Curious, I agreed. Uncle Frank's mysterious invitations were rare these days, usually reserved for significant opportunities or connections. The following afternoon, I arrived at the upscale hotel to find Uncle Frank already seated in a quiet corner of the lobby, bar with a man I didn't recognize, middle-aged, professionally dressed, with an air of quiet authority. "Tyler, this is Martin Keller, Dean of Business at Portland State," Uncle Frank introduced us. "Martin, my nephew Tyler Evans, founder of Lighthouse Digital and now Chief Digital Innovation Officer at NERH." We shook hands, and I joined them at the table, still puzzled about the purpose of the meeting. "Martin approached me after seeing the documentary," Uncle Frank explained. "Portland State is launching a new initiative I thought you'd find interesting." Dean Keller leaned forward. "We're developing a comprehensive ethics curriculum that will be required for all business majors, not just a single course, but ethics. Components integrated throughout the entire program: finance, marketing, management, technology." "Sounds promising," I said, "but I'm not sure how I can help. Uncle Frank is the one teaching business ethics these days." "We'd like your input on the technology ethics portion," Keller explained. "Specifically, issues around intellectual property, fair compensation for development work, and ethical considerations in software contracts. Your experience provides a valuable case study." "There's more," Uncle Frank added. "Tell him about the mentorship program." Keller nodded. "We're establishing a professional mentorship program pairing students with established business leaders. Given your work with the Fair Start Foundation and your documented journey from exploitation to ethical leadership, we'd be particularly interested in your participation." The request was flattering but puzzling. Why me specifically? There must be dozens of successful tech executives in Portland with mentoring experience. "2 reasons," Keller replied. "First, your story resonates with students. They've seen the documentary, they know your background. Second, you've demonstrated what we're trying to teach, that ethical business practices and commercial success aren't mutually exclusive." It was Uncle Frank who added the most compelling argument. "Think about what you needed when you were starting. Out, Tyler. Not just technical knowledge, but guidance on how to recognize your worth and negotiate fair terms. That's what these students need." Put that way, I couldn't refuse. "I'm interested. What would the commitment involve?" By the time we left the meeting, I had agreed to serve as an advisory board member for Portland State's ethics initiative and to mentor 3 students per semester in the pilot program. The commitment would require time I didn't have in abundance, but the potential impact made it worthwhile. As Uncle Frank and I walked to the parking garage afterward, I voiced the question that had been nagging at me. "You arranged this, didn't you? It wasn't just a coincidence that Dean Keller approached you after the documentary." Uncle Frank smiled slightly. "I may have mentioned your story when I guest lectured at Portland State last month, and perhaps suggested that their ethics program could benefit from your perspective. Playing matchmaker for educational initiatives now? Retirement must be boring." He laughed. "Not boring, purposeful. I spent decades building businesses that made money. Now I'm trying to build legacies that make a difference. His words stayed with me during the drive back to my office. Legacy had never been my primary motivation with Lighthouse. I'd been focused on creating quality technology and a healthy workplace culture, not on how I'd be remembered. But the acquisition had changed my perspective, forcing me to think about impact beyond quarterly results. The mentorship program launched the following semester. My first 3 mentees included a promising software engineering student developing accessibility applications, a young entrepreneur building a farm-to-table delivery platform, and a non-traditional student transitioning from nursing to healthcare. Informatics. Maria Alvarez, the nursing student, particularly reminded me of myself at that age, talented, ambitious, but lacking the business acumen to protect her interests. During our second meeting, she described a situation that immediately raised red flags. The hospital where I work wants me to develop a staff scheduling algorithm as part of my capstone project, she explained. They've offered to provide data and testing opportunities, but they want full ownership of the final product without compensation. And what do you get out of this arrangement? I asked. Real-world implementation experience and a recommendation letter. She must have seen my expression change, because she quickly added, "That's valuable, right? For my resume?" Experience and recommendations matter, I acknowledged. But so does fair compensation for your intellectual property. This algorithm could save the hospital hundreds of thousands in staffing costs annually. Your contribution deserves recognition beyond a letter. We spent the next hour developing a counter-proposal. Maria would retain co-ownership of the algorithm while granting the hospital a perpetual license. Any commercialization of the technology to other healthcare facilities would include royalties, for Maria as the developer. They'll never agree to this, she worried, looking at our draft. I'm just a student. They have lawyers and HR departments. You're not just anything, I corrected her. You're a skilled professional with specialized knowledge in both nursing and information systems, a rare and valuable combination, and you're not facing them alone. With coaching from Fair Start Foundation's legal team and my support during the negotiation process, Maria successfully secured terms that protected her intellectual property rights while delivering value to the hospital. The experience transformed her approach to her career, instilling confidence that carried into her job search after graduation. 6 months into the mentorship program, Portland State invited me to give a guest lecture to their senior business students. The auditorium was packed, with students even sitting in the aisles to hear my presentation on ethical technology development in healthcare. After covering the technical aspects of our work at Lighthouse NERH, I shifted to the business ethics portion of my talk. The technology sector is particularly vulnerable to exploitation because the work product is intangible. You can't easily demonstrate ownership of code the way you can point to a physical product you've created. A student raised his hand. But don't work-for-hire agreements protect companies from developers walking away with proprietary code? When properly executed with fair compensation, yes, I agreed. The problem arises when those agreements are used to exploit developers who lack bargaining power, especially young developers eager to build their portfolios. I shared statistics from Fair Start Foundation's cases. Over 60% involved verbal agreements without proper documentation. 75% featured promises of future compensation that never materialized. Nearly 40% involved family businesses where personal relationships complicated professional boundaries. The pattern is remarkably consistent, I explained. A talented young professional, often a recent graduate, agrees to provide services at below-market rates or completely free in exchange for promised future opportunities. Those opportunities either never materialize or come with unexpected conditions that devalue the original contribution. Another student asked, "How do we protect ourselves without seeming ungrateful or demanding, especially when working with family?" "By recognizing that professionalism benefits both parties," I replied. Clear agreements protect relationships. By establishing expectations up front, they're not signs of distrust, they're frameworks for mutual respect. After the lecture, Dean Keller invited me to dinner with several faculty members. The conversation eventually turned to the documentary and its impact on business education. We've incorporated it into 3 different courses now, mentioned Professor Diane Watson, who taught entrepreneurship. Students are particularly struck by the contrast between the RDS and Lighthouse business models. It makes abstract ethical concepts concrete for them. What surprises me, added Professor James Mitchell from the technology department, is how many students report similar experiences. About 15% of our business majors have done unpaid or severely underpaid work for family businesses, often with negative outcomes. That percentage tracks with our foundation's research, I confirmed. The problem is more widespread than most people realize because these situations often remain private. Family disputes rarely make headlines unless they involve major corporations or lawsuits. Dean Keller studied me thoughtfully. Have you considered expanding your educational outreach? Perhaps developing a curriculum module based on your experience? That could be adopted by business schools nationally. The idea was intriguing. While the documentary had raised awareness, a structured educational program could provide practical tools for prevention and resolution of these situations. I'd need partners with educational expertise, I said, considering the possibility. Lighthouse NERH keeps me fully occupied, and the foundation is still in its early stages. Portland State would be happy to collaborate, Keller offered immediately. We could provide the academic framework while you contribute the case studies and practical insights. By the time I returned home that evening, the seed of a new initiative had been planted. I called Uncle Frank to share the concept of an educational curriculum focused specifically on ethical practices in family businesses and technology development. Perfect timing, he replied, surprising me once again. I've been approached by a publishing house about expanding my book into a series focusing on different aspects of business ethics. Educational materials would complement that perfectly. We arranged to meet that weekend to explore the possibilities. As I ended the call, I marveled at how our paths had continued to intertwine. From adversaries to reluctant partners to active collaborators in promoting ethical business practices. The website that had crashed years ago had set in motion a chain, reaction neither of us could have predicted. What began as exploitation had evolved into education. What started as betrayal had transformed into a platform for positive change. The following morning, I received an email from Jessica Rivera, our former mentee now working at Lighthouse. She had been leading a project to implement our patient management system at a rural hospital network in western Maine, bringing cutting-edge healthcare technology to communities with limited resources. Final implementation complete, she reported. All 7 facilities are now live on the system, with staff fully trained and patient feedback overwhelmingly positive. The chief administrator says it's revolutionary for their practice. Thought you'd want to know your technology is making a real difference for people who previously had to drive 3 hours to Portland for specialized care. Attached were photos of hospital staff celebrating the launch, along with quotes from patients about the improved experience. This was the impact I'd hoped for when founding Lighthouse. Technology that genuinely improved healthcare delivery and patient outcomes. I forwarded the email to the NERH leadership team. I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The crashed website, that initial failure and betrayal, had ultimately led to something far more valuable. A healthcare technology platform serving thousands of patients, an educational initiative reaching future business leaders, and a foundation supporting exploited young professionals nationwide. Sometimes, the most catastrophic crashes create the clearest paths forward. 10 years to the day after I walked out of Reynolds Dynamic Solutions, I stood on the stage at Tech Impact, the largest healthcare technology conference in the country. Behind me, a massive screen displayed the Lighthouse NERH logo alongside our latest innovation. an AI-driven diagnostic support system that had reduced misdiagnosis rates by 37% in initial trials. Healthcare technology isn't just about software and systems, I told the audience of industry leaders, medical professionals, and technology innovators. It's about the people whose lives are improved by better care. Every line of code we write at Lighthouse serves a purpose beyond efficiency or profit. It represents our commitment to patients and providers alike. As I concluded my keynote presentation, the applause was gratifying, but what truly moved me was seeing familiar faces in the front row. My parents, beaming with pride, Uncle Frank and Aunt Sharon, who had traveled from their home in the Berkshires despite Uncle Frank's recent knee surgery, and my original team from Lighthouse, many of whom now led their own divisions within our expanded organization. At the IEI reception afterward, I was approached by a distinguished woman I recognized immediately from her media appearances, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the newly appointed Surgeon General. "That diagnostic system is remarkable," she said, shaking my hand. "The potential impact on rural and underserved communities is exactly what we've been looking for. I'd like to discuss implementing it in federally qualified health centers nationwide." Before I could respond, Uncle Frank appeared at my side. "Dr. Rodriguez, it is a pleasure to meet you. I'm Frank Reynolds, Tyler's uncle and biggest fan." The irony of that introduction wasn't lost on me. From exploiter to champion, Uncle Frank's transformation had been as profound as my own journey from exploited nephew to healthcare technology leader. "Mr. Reynolds," Dr. Rodriguez smiled, "I recognize you from the documentary. Quite a compelling story you both have." "Tyler's the compelling part," Uncle Frank replied without hesitation. "I was just a cautionary tale." Later that evening, our extended family gathered for dinner at a restaurant overlooking the Chicago skyline. The atmosphere was relaxed and celebratory, a stark contrast to the tense family gatherings of the past. My father and Uncle Frank, once barely on speaking terms, now sat side by side, swapping stories and good-naturedly disagreeing about baseball teams. "I have an announcement," I said as dessert was served. "The Fair Start Foundation has reached a significant milestone. As of last week, we've provided legal assistance to over 5,000 young professionals nationwide, with a 90% success rate in securing fair compensation or favorable settlements." "Congratulations," echoed around the table, with Uncle Frank raising his glass in a toast. "To turn personal setbacks into public good." "There's more," I continued. "Portland State University has approved our business ethics curriculum for national distribution. Starting next fall, our program will be available to business schools across the country." "The ripple effect continues," my father observed thoughtfully. "From one crashed website to a nationwide educational initiative. Who would have predicted that?" Uncle Frank's expression grew serious. "I've been thinking about that recently. How a single poor decision can lead to consequences beyond imagination, both negative and eventually positive." He turned to me. "You know, I've never properly thanked you." "For what?" I asked, surprised. "For crashing." At my puzzled look, he elaborated. "Not literally crashing the website. We both know that happened because Scott messed with code he didn't understand. I mean for the metaphorical crash, the collapse that forced me to reevaluate everything. Without that reckoning, I'd probably still be the same exploitative businessman, burning through talent and relationships in pursuit of quick profits." The table fell silent as he continued. "The documentary calls it the true cost of free work. But there's another side to that equation, the true value of necessary failure. Sometimes we need to crash before we can rebuild properly." His words resonated deeply. That website crash had indeed been necessary, not just for Uncle Frank's transformation, but for my own growth. Without that painful experience, would I have recognized my worth so clearly? Would I have built Lighthouse with such intentional focus on ethical practices and fair compensation? The following morning, I met with Jessica Rivera, now Lighthouse's Director of Implementation, to review our expansion plans for the diagnostic system. She'd grown into a formidable leader, mentoring young developers with the same care she'd received when joining our team. The Surgeon General's interest could accelerate our timeline significantly, she noted, updating our project roadmap. Are we prepared to scale that quickly? We'll need to be, I replied. This is exactly the kind of impact we've been working toward. Technology that reaches those who need it most. Jessica smiled. Remember when you told me that exploitative experiences could become fuel for something better? I didn't believe you then, but looking at everything we've built, the foundation, the educational programs, this technology, it makes sense now. As we wrapped up our meeting, I received a text from Uncle Frank. Heading back to Berkshire's. Book manuscript approved for publication next spring. Editor says your foreword is powerful and essential. Thank you. The book he referred to was the final volume in his ethics series, focusing specifically on family business dynamics and intergenerational exploitation. I'd hesitated when he first asked me to write the foreword, uncertain about revisiting our history so publicly yet again. But ultimately, I'd recognized the value in sharing our complete journey, from conflict to reconciliation to collaboration toward common goals. That afternoon, I visited the Chicago office of Fair Start Foundation, where a team of lawyers and career counselors were handling cases remarkably similar to my own experience a decade earlier. In the conference room, a whiteboard displayed our organization's simple mission statement: ensuring talents are valued, contributions are compensated, and opportunities are legitimate. Laura Chen, our executive director, updated me on current cases. We're seeing a significant increase in technology-related exploitation, coding, design, social media management. Family businesses remain the primary source, but startups are a close second. Any success stories to share? I asked. She smiled. Remember the graphic design student from Arizona whose uncle used her work without payment or credit? She just won her case, full compensation plus public acknowledgement of her contribution. And the company? Surprisingly, they're doing better than ever since implementing the ethical practices we recommended. Turns out treating talent fairly is good for business. Who knew? Laura's wry smile acknowledged the obviousness of this conclusion to everyone in the room. Before leaving Chicago, I made one final stop, a small tech incubator on the city's north side where Maria Alvarez, my former mentee, was now launching her healthcare scheduling platform. The algorithm she'd developed for her capstone project had evolved into a sophisticated system being adopted by hospitals nationwide. None of this would exist if you hadn't taught me to value my work, she told me as she demonstrated the latest version. I would have given away the original algorithm for a recommendation letter? You did the hard part, I reminded her. You stood up for yourself and negotiated fair terms. With backup, she countered. That's what most young professionals lack, someone in their corner who understands the landscape and can validate their concerns. As my flight back to Portland took off that evening, I reflected on how thoroughly that crashed website had transformed. Not just my life, but the lives of so many others. What began as a personal injustice had blossomed into a movement for change. Educational programs teaching ethical business practices, a foundation providing legal support to exploited young professionals, and a healthcare technology company improving patient care nationwide. The website had crashed, yes, but from those digital ashes had risen something far more valuable than code. A network of support, education, and advocacy, ensuring that talents were recognized, contributions were valued, and opportunities were legitimate for the next generation of innovators. Sometimes the most catastrophic crashes create not just the clearest paths forward, but entirely new destinations we never could have imagined. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.